Beavemanites and Docutrons, assemble!
Okay, so back in the day, I was way above the wave, man. I traded in the girls for the video games. I played so much Super Smash Bros. Other kids called
All right, well, this is Beaveman in the Dock, and I am the Beaveman, and I'm coming to you from Renegade Beaver Studios here on another cold fucking day in Michigan. It's probably going to snow, and I got to get my ass out there and rake the rest of the fucking leaves, but they keep fucking falling, and I'm getting really fucking pissed about it. And I just wanted to see how many times I could swear on the first 40 to 50 seconds of Beaveman and the Dock. And with me today, as always, well, not always, we have some sort of a representation of Doc. I have Paper Doc here with me. Hey, Beaveman, it's great to be here again. It is a little cold out here. I've noticed that my nipples could cut glass. Okay, Doc, sometimes there's things that you probably shouldn't say. I'm also starting to get a little bit of tent over here in my toga. Okay, well, thanks, Paper Doc, for weighing in. Also with me today, I have my friend Ron, who's he's agreed to hang out with us and go over some stuff today. Ron, why don't you just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was recently incarcerated. No.
That would have been interesting.
That would have been interesting, you know.
Well, it's not a hard question, Ron. Just tell us about yourself.
Before we started this, I was very conversationalist. Now I'm like, oh, the mic's on. Let's see.
I guess I should have been recording the whole time.
Yeah.
I didn't want to bore people too much, though, with martial art talk.
No.
That's what you call a completely nerd speech, talking about martial arts.
No, I completely understand. Well, I'm a stay-at-home parent right now. I've been that way for the last 18 years, off and on between jobs. Like you know, I study martial arts, 2 different styles. And what else? I'm a big community advocate. I volunteer for a couple NPOs. Whatever we can do to help people out, I want to be involved in that. Trying to fill in the fillers here where you told me not to fill in.
I'm not that interesting.
Oh. I enjoy teaching. I teach a free computer class at one of the community centers. I'm an IT, and that's about it. Sorry, you're pointing to the mic. I'm not used to that. Usually I have a Bluetooth in my ear, and I'm usually moving my head around, and I can do that. So thank you. Well,
so you have that in common with Doc. He likes to walk around with a Bluetooth in his ear.
Not that anybody calls me. No one calls me except a couple of friends, but it's one of those things where if I don't have it in, I don't look important.
Is it that what it is?
It is.
I noticed that we're going to go talk about nerddom here. First of all, being a nerd is not a negative thing. It used to be when I was a kid.
Yeah,
People would call me a nerd, and you're like, oh, I am a nerd. I'm such a loser. But now, thankfully, nerddom is aspired to. As a matter of fact, my daughter insists that she's a nerd, and I'm like, you wish you were, but you're really not. But
back in the day, you were considered a nerd and you got your ass kicked, right? And
right.
I think that's one of the things that gravitated that Revenge of the Nerds, the movie, was the selling point is like, if you're going to be a nerd, you're going to get your ass kicked. And at the end of the movie, like in everything else, nerds actually control the damn world.
Right, nerds inherit the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. Even when you look at different hobbies and what people try to think about themselves as being cool when they get a little bit older. For example, like you and I were having this conversation about martial arts, right? Mm-hmm. And when people come and they try out martial arts, I notice that sometimes in my head I'm like, oh, look how cool I am. I can do this martial art.
I agree.
And show it to these people who don't understand it or don't know it because it's so super cool. But the truth is, it's still a nerd hobby. So unless you're taking it super seriously and you want to be a tournament fighter, and even then it's still nerdy. It's a nerdy hobby. It's not like in this country specifically, of course, because I'm from this country, I would say that it's still a nerd hobby. If you were in, Okinawa or Japan or China and Korea, and you took it there was more serious. It's not a nerd hobby. It's an actual sport. Or
I would say 20 years ago it was a nerd hobby, but not anymore.
You don't think it's a nerd hobby? I still feel like it's a nerd hobby.
Your style, you don't deal with a lot of kids, and the style that I do.
Thank God we do not.
Yeah, in my style,
kids can't do our style. Because you do so many joint locks. There's supposed to be our style is supposed to be your nuts, but and this is more nerd talk for you who are interested. In my opinion, it's nerd talk. Ron thinks it's cool.
I do. I do.
Because we do joint locks, the bones are not completely fused. Technically, your bones are not fused before the age of 21, technically. But you can do x-rays to see if you're stopped growing. They do have those. You do a little hand x-ray. But the joints are very, very flexible at a young age. So our style, it used to be the rule was you couldn't do it before the age of 17, but they've broken that rule a few times. And the reason why is because you can stretch a child's joints quite a ways before they realize you just did. It's not like a gradual pain for us, for adults.
Okay.
But when you stretch a child's joint, it's pain all of a sudden. And you could actually...
It's hyperextension then.
Yeah, you can. You could actually really damage a kid's joints by doing that. And because their bones aren't fused, you could cause what we call like an avulsion fracture, or you could cause some growth plate injury there.
That just happened to me for one of the black belt tests. I said, okay, he did this motion, and he spins around and grabs my elbow and uses his shoulder to break my elbow. And I said, that's a great motion. That's great. Everybody loves it. So, but this is what we're going to do for safety. You're going to slide your shoulder up under my armpit, pull down and yell. That's going to indicate you've done the motion and they know exactly what you've done. I said, can you do that on a test? And we practiced it a few times. And come his test, I said, are you ready? It's like, yeah. And sure enough, sure as shit, turns around, puts my elbow on his shoulder, and I'm like, oh, don't let him see you cry.
But then you yelled. You're like, this will indicate in the end of the movement as I yell.
I did not yell. I walked back to the judge's table in pain, saying, okay, you've done the motion. We'll talk about control later, right? And I said, okay, what's going to happen next? They're like, okay, now you're going to spar him. And I got to throw a punch.
You're like, I got to spar with one arm.
Yeah, it did that. So it's pretty much healed up now, but it's one of those things where I had to be really careful for a while.
Yeah.
And doing that.
Well, both my elbows are bad. They've been bad for years before I ever started jiu-jitsu, because I've never stopped doing push-ups from the time I entered the Army. I've always done push-ups. I do push-ups every day. It doesn't matter. And so the inner aspect of my elbows have always hurt. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You do jiu-jitsu, they get more limber. All your joints get more limber. So, for example, I know everybody's super interested in this topic. For example, if someone in karate were to put a joint lock on me, I can sit there and laugh at them because it's not doing anything.
Okay.
Because my joints are stretched and I'm used to the pain, and most of the time they get it completely wrong because it's not something that they do. Even Aikido. I had a black belt in Aikido put a, quote, joint lock on me, and I was like, are you doing something right now? And they're like, well, it's supposed to work. I'm like, well, it's not doing anything. I'm standing here looking at you, and I could be hitting you in the face over and over again. So as time goes by, that's what happens to you. You get desensitized to it. You actually start to feel it as a stretch and not painful until it gets to a certain point. Now, if people are overzealous, like you said in that test, sometimes, and this usually happens with new people, they're like, it doesn't work. So then all of a sudden they drop all their weight on it to try to get it to work. But one of our black belts, he does it sometimes too, which is always funny. So I named my elbows Ricky. And my elbows are actually named Ricky. There's like Ricky 1 and Ricky 2. So it takes a long time to recover from that. But I know exactly what you're talking about. But it's for me, it's easier to shake. It's easy to shake off now because you're like, oh, it's just happens right away and that's it, and you're done with it.
But like how we got into this 20 years ago, this was a nerd thing, and now it's not. It's becoming, with the advantage of McDojos, we'll say, it's become a lot more prevalent with Taekwondo.
Right.
And with that, it's no longer a nerd thing. It's a cool thing. Right.
Is it though?
Yeah, it is. However, and I'm going to say
if that was the case though, I wouldn't say I see a lot of jockey people going out for martial arts. However, it might be that they don't have time though.
There are two factors here. Price is one. Two factors that I can think of right off the bat. Time is one. That's definite, because you and I both know that you have to schedule time, and life happens between if you're doing it or your kid's doing it. How do you focus school and other activities involved? The other one is pricing. And of course, where we got to, it's a nonprofit. The one set fee covers, it's an umbrella cost, right? And you go to a McDojo, and you guys just picked up a new kohai or a new student, and he told me the prices at one of these McDojos, and he
Usually like $80 a month.
Oh,
His was more?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right? And that was like for a 6-month trial basis or something like that. And I could be wrong about that, but it was exorbitantly high. And I'm like, didn't we do the research? And I admit I fell victim to that because I came out of Maine in the military, and I thought, I'm going to do this. You know, I want my black belt. And they said, this is where you want to go. And the guy started me over. I'm like, for a couple of different motions in the hand, and I'm starting over?
Right.
Okay. And I said, no more dog and pony. Till someone told me about the Southside Dojo where we go to. And I'm like, skeptical. Right. And I'm like, it's one umbrella price. I'm like, right. And they said, you get to do all this. Right. So I said, carry an orange head. And I was like, is it really like this? And they're like, yeah, it's really like that. Okay. Now I'll watch on the bench. And I sat on the bench for 4 years.
Wow, for 4 years you sat there?
I did. 4 years on the bench. I just watched, right? I watched.
Well, that's right, because when my wife and daughter and son joined, you hadn't been there that long, had you?
I hadn't. In fact, I remember the first time I met Amethyst. And that was funny because I still remember making an ass of myself. It's like,
she doesn't remember.
That's the one thing. Yeah, everybody remembers when I make an ass of myself.
It's actually amusing for us over on our side. We're like, what's Ron going to do? What's he going to say? Let's watch.
Oh, yeah. I hear about it all the time. It's like, and then because I said, oh, what's your name? Amethyst? So do you have a friend named Opal, a cousin? She goes, yes, I do. I'm like, okay. Ass has struck again.
Right.
So I know. I am consciously working my way to being a better conversationalist, as I mentioned earlier.
I don't think you should change. I think that if you change, then the reality show portion of the dojo would be much, much more boring.
Oh, it would be.
I can't tell you the amount of times that we enjoy ourselves on our side. So the setup of for more nerd speak. So the setup of our dojo is there's a hardwood floor side of the dojo. That's half the dojo.
Yep.
And that is where karate is.
Karate,
they're at.
kendo, what else? Karate,
well,
kendo,
just for the overlap time.
Oh,
the overlap time with our side, which is the jiu-jitsu side, is matted so that we can do, flips and rolls and stuff like that and not kill ourselves because we're all over. Most of us are over 40, so we really don't want to injure ourselves.
Wow,
and
yeah,
one of us
you
is
guys
over
are.
60. One of us is over 60, so we really don't want to hurt ourselves. And no, two of them. No, I take that back. The two are almost 10 years younger than me. The two Shodans, or the Nidans rather, they're both younger than I am, like almost by 10 years. But most of us, the majority of us, are over 40. And even if you're in your 30s, it's hard to do flips and rolls.
Actually, you just picked up Bill's daughter. She's doing it.
She's young. Yeah. But we get to, it's almost like a reality TV show for us. So we'll actually, on our side, stop what we're doing a lot of times and see what Ron is doing.
Thank you.
Because we can actually hear Ron's voice, and we're very quiet on our side. So we can hear the karate folks. And so we're always, there's many points in times when we've just stopped what we're doing just to observe.
And honestly, I try to observe you guys too, right? And
but you guys get in trouble for observing us.
Mm-hmm. Well, under the old style of Japanese teaching, right? If you didn't have an apprenticeship, right, the one thing you could do is watch and steal or acquire, as we say in this day and age. So every time I see a joint lock that you guys do, yes, I'm showing stuff to people that I have to show. But if it's momentary, there's a momentary stationary point, I will look over and see Bill, you, whatever. And if you guys aren't standing around going, ha, 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 that's good. Or Keith isn't coming out with a knife or his yarbo. I'm like, what can I glean from that? What can I learn? And then, of course, I will pull one of you aside, right? And I was like, can you show me what you did? And, of course, by the time we get off the floor, you guys are already gone. So I'm left with a hanging question. I'm like, oh, remember the question. Then my wife will come up to me. What do we got going on for today? And there's that filler word again. We got to go to farmer's market. We got to do that. And I'll see you guys again on the next day. And I'm like, hey, let's line up. I had a question. What was the question? I was going to ask him about something. So,
well, when we watch, and like I said, it's a reality TV show for us because we have a lot of times where we're pausing because we don't do more nerd talk. I don't know how. Hopefully, people are interested in this subject. We don't do katas. We don't do forms. So
not true. You guys do
everything we do is a form.
But you do a bow form.
Well, yeah, but we do a Joe form. We don't really. But I mean, what I'm saying is, it's not like we say, okay, we're gonna do some sort of a kyung or a form or whatever. What we do is the instructor shows us this thing, and then we do it. So we all generally know what each thing is, whatever. So we'll be doing that stuff, but we have a lot of times where there's downtime where it's, okay, you're waiting for somebody to finish their reps, or we're talking something out, or
of course,
or our sensei is talking about midget wrestling. I don't know. He'll go off on a tangent about stuff. But what we'll do, though, is we will, because we have so much time, a lot of times we'll pause and just watch what karate is doing, and we'll laugh. And what we laugh about a lot of times is we'll see you guys do a joint lock. And whether it'll be you or, Phil would try it or Tim would try it, and we'll sit there and be like, And one of the things that we've always wondered is, why doesn't anybody come over and ask us how to do it? Because, for example, like I was telling you earlier, I've had Aikido and karate and Kenpo too try joint locks on me, and they never work. They never do anything. I'm like, how come nobody ever asks us how to do them? So that's one of the things. So we'll sit there. We will actually, if you guys have ever observed us, we'll actually stop what we're doing, and we'll all stand there and just watch you guys. But you guys never seem to notice us doing it.
Keith, after one of the classes, I was trying to do the joint lock on somebody. All right, and I had the motion right, but not the technique. Everything was there except a better technique. And he came up to me after karate was over. He was like, Ron, can I talk to you about something? I'm like, yeah. Punch me.
You're like, fuck no, you're not my sensei. That's what I had told him.
Well, he said, punch me. And I'm like, whenever one of you guys say punch me, I know I'm in a world of fucking hurt coming. Right? And I said,
you're like, you're not Bruce Lee. Try and hit me.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. You want to learn something, you ask, but there's the ultimate pay. He said, punch me. And it's like, okay. And I did that. He says, this is the motion you want to do. Now, I don't know if he said punch me, but it's like grab his wrist or something. So he did the motion, right? And he dropped me within 2 seconds. And I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong? And he said, here, grab, do the motion. You're doing it wrong. I'm like, okay. I grabbed the wrist, came around. So do that. And I learned a lot just by watching. And once again, feeling damn pain.
Right.
It's like,
you have to experience the motion to understand it, and that's why we lose students also.
Yeah, I would agree.
When you see people almost vomit from what you do to them, and it doesn't look like as an observer, it doesn't look like we're doing anything. When I was training for my first degree black belt, we made these little video clips because my son was, 16 or 17 at the time. And so he was kind of helping me when I wasn't at the dojo practicing. And I didn't put stuff on him hard at all. So my daughter was filming me practicing with him. And it looks like I'm not doing anything to him. He's just dropping. And I'm like, so I can understand why people will watch what we do and be like, it's fake.
No, I never think it's fake. I just know what's going on. That's the misperception. It's like, and I'll lead right into our topic. It's like Ecclesiastes here, right? If you watch what this guy's doing, he doesn't experience a lot of the crap that's going on in the world. He tries to, but he doesn't stay long enough to understand it. When he walks through these things, it's like there was a passage where he goes, I wanted to see hard work. I wanted to experience it. It doesn't explain how long he did that hard work. It just explains he did it.
Right?
And how do you get to experience something without actually putting forth the time and the effort and going through it for a couple of years? Now, you trained for your black belt for a couple of years. It wasn't one of these things like, I know 5 motions of this, I'm an expert. No, you took your time and you learned and you experienced it. And when you got to be good at it, it was so flawless, right, that no one could believe you, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like when you're doing that, right, you got to go into it and you got to experience it, but you just can't, no one's going to believe that you can do it.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is with this one, when you're talking about like Ecclesiastes, where it starts from one beginning, and it's a very short, and of course, our source for today's topic is the Bible.
Well, the Bible.
The Bible. And we're talking about Ecclesiastes. And why are we talking about that? It's not because this is a religious podcast, as I said a million times. This is a comedy podcast. It's meant to open your eyes about some stuff. But
it is.
The reason why we're talking about it is because I happen to, and it goes back to the dojo, I happened to hear one of the people at the dojo mention it to somebody else, and he kind of said something like, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly what he said. But
There's that word, paraphrasing. I
paraphrasing.
like that.
He said something like, whatever we do doesn't matter, right? And then he mentioned the chapter in the Bible. And I said to myself, or lots of times I'll talk to myself in the third person and I'll say, Beaveman, is that true? Is that what that really says? I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I know about the Bible. But honestly, I don't have a Catholic Bible. I have 2 Bibles, and neither one of them are Catholic Bibles. So I don't even know if this chapter is in the Catholic Bible. It might be. It might not be.
I actually had to go out and get one of these.
I don't know if it. Although I'm a Catholic, and mostly because I enjoyed the host and kneeling, if you know what I mean.
Ooh. If you want to go to a good Catholic service, you do an aerobics workout, and all they did give you is a damn cookie that's flavorless and wine. That's BS. If you're going to make me go through that,
you made me do a lot of kneeling.
Yeah, give me a good rosé.
I remember sitting in Catholic church as a child and just really thinking about breakfast the whole time. Because once you've done your first communion, you don't get to eat before you have the communion. There's a time period. Yeah, you can't eat before you've received the body of Christ. And so when you're really hungry, and I was a fat kid, so when you're really hungry sitting there as a fat kid, and all you can look forward to is breakfast, and you're just counting down the time till you get that little wafer, the host, which is not filling whatsoever. It's tiny.
Not.
It's I understand some places get like vanilla wafers, but in the Catholic Church, it's an actual host wafer. It's just it actually melts on your tongue. And I wasn't allowed to drink the wine, so I couldn't even have that. So, as a fat kid, you're hungry. All you want is for church to end so you can go get breakfast. It's a tough time.
I was raised in the Catholic Church too, and we got to drink wine. Wow.
Oh no, my parents didn't let me drink the wine. They don't drink, so they don't take the communion wine either. Which to me is you're a bad Catholic if you don't take the communion wine, because you're supposed to have the body and blood of Christ. Anyway, the point being
that's weird, because that always reminded me of cannibalism.
Yeah, it's a weird concept in some religions. I know Christian religions also that frown upon it, because it's like, why would you say that isn't there? I don't know. I'm going to have to take a religion class again. I took a world religion class, but I need to take a actual different branches of Christianity and their beliefs, et cetera, to see, because like you said, some of them are like, well, why would you say that it transforms into the body and blood of Christ? That seems like
it's all negative. Metaphoric.
Yeah, it seems like
it's
a
all
negative
metaphoric.
thing. Oh no, it's not metaphoric. It's supposed to be actually true. But I back to what you were saying is, how can this person, or the teacher, as they say in Ecclesiastes, how can he say that he observed hard work when how long was his life? We don't know. The chapter itself, I mean, the book of the Bible itself and the chapters itself are only 12 chapters, so it's a nice short read. But like you said, you can only observe something for a certain period of time, unless this guy lived to be a couple hundred years old. And let's not forget also that he was a king in Jerusalem, so how much hard work was he doing?
Well, I think he was a prince. He was King David's son. So, here you have the world before you, right? Mm-hmm. And the one thing that got me was Princess Diana would tell her sons, these are your people, right? Before she passed away, these are your people.
She said it like this.
Yes.
These are your people.
You need to go out and be among them. And one of the princes actually scurried away in the night and went to the homeless people for a while. And it made the headlines.
He got himself some biscuits.
And some tea, I think.
Some tea.
Mm-hmm. And he was in the royal army and all that.
Oh, yeah, Prince Harry. Kind of a badass. Or at least so it's portrayed. I think he probably was. Because wasn't he an enlisted man? I don't think he did. I don't think he took a commission, did he? Or originally he didn't take a commission.
I know that. I think one of his nicknames was Bullet Sponge, because when they found out when it leaked where he was, I think in Afghanistan or the Middle East.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they're going to try to kill him.
Yeah, they had to actually pull him back into the UK. It's like, you're doing your job, you're doing great, but we can't have you dead.
No, I mean that.
It was top secret, I think, for a while.
Right. It's also sad that we know that much about the royal family.
Mm-hmm. And one thing about this is this guy, you're traveling around the area and you've got every available resource, right? I walked among the poor. You weren't poor, right? It's like
You walked among them.
Yeah, it's like saying you're driving a Jag on the freeway and everybody else has got a Honda. That's not driving among the poor, being among the poor. It's just showing that you've got bodyguards in case something goes wrong.
Right. Well, the thing is, though, is he was a king of Jerusalem. If you remember from Catholic teachings, because it says it's King David's son.
Yeah, I got
If
that.
you're a part of the royal line, we're all King David's son.
Oh.
So that doesn't mean he was King David's son. That means he's part of the line. So they're all King David's son. Because you're all
Wow.
descended from David.
Well, it's like saying that when I was raised Jewish, that I'm one of the chosen people. And I'm like, it's news to me. I haven't won the damn lottery yet. Someone's got to tell me.
Well, when people make those comments about the Jewish folk, I'm like, well, are you Christian? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, then you're Jewish, you son of a bitch, because we're all descended from the Jews, so go fuck yourself. Figure that one out. Yeah, there's a funny
I love
line.
the paradoxes.
There's a funny line. What is it? Is it the first, was it Meet the Fockers? Not Meet the Fockers. What was the first one called? I don't know, the Ben Stiller movie. He's talking to Luke.
Meet the Parents?
Was it that one?
I'm not sure. I'm not a
can't
big
remember.
Ben Stiller fan.
But he says they like made Robert De Niro like making an excuse for Ben Stiller, and he's like, he's Jewish, and Owen Wilson's like, so was JC, man. It's like right on. So was JC.
I never got that when you're in Bible. Everybody shoves religion. When you're in Catholic school, everybody shoves religion down your throat. In fact, when you go to a theology class in Catholic high school, they don't like, so what do you think our background is? And we could have all been aliens. And I'm always into the extraterrestrial stuff. And I'm like,
Oh, so you should be a Mormon.
I should to a point, but I think
Well,
I'm
I
more
know.
qualified
They're
as
more supernatural than aliens. But
Not really. If you look at their background, they're more into being batshit crazy.
well, but they have like this background in ritual, so like magic. If you really go back far, there's a really good. My favorite podcast is the last podcast on the left. Very
Okay.
good podcast. They did I think it was 7 parts. They did a 7-part series on Mormonism. Did you know Mormons don't even like to be called Mormons?
No, I didn't.
They're the Church of Latter-day Saints. They don't like to be called Mormons.
And I've known a couple where they wear the magic underwear.
Magic underwear?
Yeah, their undergarb has to be a certain way.
Oh, really?
I do believe that because I had a couple guys I knew that in the military that were Mormon.
Right.
But
I knew a guy in the military that was Mormon. He was in our basic training, and the entire time we were in basic training, we were trying to get him to jerk off. We're like, just do it, man. Do it, man. Come on, do it. He's like, no, I can't do that. That'd be wrong. We're like, no, just do it, man. Come on, do it. Do it.
you know, I am
speaking of which,
I am so glad I went in the Air Force. I really am, because it's like, not that I have any disrespect for any of the other military branches, right?
well, you can disrespect the Navy and the Air Force.
Well, being in the Air Force, which was so cool, is why we send the Army and the Marines in first? Because we tested higher on the scores.
Sure,
and on
sure.
top of that, the one thing I loved about it, it's like, oh, you're a death machine. No. We're smart enough to send the bombers over and press a button.
Well, the funny thing is, though, when you say all that stuff, you're not really insulting the Army and the Marines. Mm-hmm. Well, I can speak at least from the Army, and I'm pretty sure I'm speaking for the Marines when I say this also, is that any insult coming from the Air Force, nobody gives a shit. They're like, because you could insult us all day long, and we're still like, yeah, but you're in the Air Force, so your opinion means nothing.
Well, the one thing I really do like, and I've said this before and I saw it on the internet and it holds true, is that the military can joke about other military, right? However, if someone comes outside, a civilian says, oh, you guys are like, well, I'll look at them like, you're not one of us. You're not allowed. You're not a brother or a sister. Yeah,
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up, you're not allowed. Nobody gives a shit what you have to say. No, I totally agree. But what were we saying? Okay.
But it's back to what we were saying.
Yeah,
this guy wasn't really a part of society. He walked around, he had untold riches when he walked around, and it's like, I bought slaves. I think the bigger thing would have been to do is let them go and give up your riches, if at all, for a year, maybe 2.
Well, there's some wisdom to his words, though. I mean, I think that what you're seeing is you're seeing an evolution of him over time. So here he is starting at the beginning. He's like, well, first, because he decided that everything was futile, right? He's like, it doesn't matter what we do. and he says this later on, it doesn't matter what we do because we all die. So what is I think what it is he's questioning what's the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? Why are we here?
The more I got into this, the more I thought he was goth and emo. I really did. It's like
This all sucks.
Yeah,
It all sucks.
It all sucks. It's like render God to what is God, whatever. And I'm like, dude, where are you happy? And then he realizes I can be happy if I'm drunk half the time. So he gets drunk. He's drinking. I went to comedy shows and bought drinks for everybody. I'm like, and then I got sad again. Right? He was a meth head waiting to happen.
Well, I mean, I guess if you wrote it today, he makes good points. But if you wrote it today and he said, yeah, why should I have a job because I'm going to die anyway? I could just not have a job. I could get assistance from the country, and I could have lots of children, and each one of them could get, welfare, and I could just eat really well and hang out and not have to work.
You see that today, actually. You really do.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If he was born today, if he was, and
Yeah.
even if he was a king now, he's like, well, I could do nothing. And where his theory is that money won't buy you happiness, basically, because you can't take it with you. I'm like, well, does it though? I use my sister-in-law as an example. I remember when I was like, I think I might have still been in school, in nursing school, and I was dating, or I was friends with my wife now, and her sister was having like prime rib for like Christmas and Thanksgiving, and had all this stuff, and was getting all this free assistance from the government, and all this stuff. Wow. And she's never worked a day in her life, but she had all this stuff, and we don't. And we're like, well, what incentive do you have to make something of your life when you see people that are doing nothing and they're doing better than you are? Or you see people that,
That's a good point.
when you talk about, well, if my wife and I got divorced, for example, if my wife and I got divorced, then she could get, child support from me, but she would also qualify for other things. Maybe she could qualify for after school care or whatever for my daughter and not have to pay for it. And she would qualify for all these things that she doesn't qualify for because we're married. Like, we could literally get a divorce but stay together and make more money than we make now. So what's the incentive? What's the incentive to stay together? Which, again, you look at that and you're like, if this guy grew up now, when he'd look at one, I think he'd be really disappointed because he says something in there also about, it doesn't matter what we do because the sun's always going to rise and fall. I'm like, well, is it? Maybe back in your day, the sun will always rise and fall and the earth will always be there. And I'm like, is it? Will human race always be there? Will it? Probably not. But he also says, it doesn't matter what we do, it won't affect the world or the earth. I'm like, well, clearly this was way before climate change and global warming.
That's the one thing I took away from this is as he's going through it, you see the passage of time and what really matters and what doesn't matter. He never looked beyond what he could see, right?
But he says that. He says that too. I mean, he says, it doesn't matter what I try to learn. He's like, you can't know everything and you can't see everything.
Oh, that I agree with, but he never looked beyond the passage of time as far as future generations. One of the things that he mentions is that this is the now and what is then and what will come to pass. But where's his legacy, right?
We don't have one. He says that.
Yeah,
we don't have one.
That back then, your average lifespan was to 30.
Well, not if you read the Bible. Back then, your average lifespan was like 700.
Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. That's before they invented Common Core math, and I think that's where the basis came from with the Common Core math these days.
The calendar, or the idea of the calendar. If they were actually counting by lunar cycle as a year instead of calling a year a year.
He was drunk half the time
Well,
sometimes.
I mean, in the early days, he was drunk.
But he doesn't have a legacy. And without legacy, you pass down information. And that's always been through the passage of time. If you look beyond what you're passing down, what do you pass down? And if you could see, I know I'm going somewhere with this, but I got sidetracked here. I don't know. But if you see where he was going, it's like, once I'm dead, I'm dead. That's it. I'm like, okay, well, where are your scribes? You know, this is before the Gutenberg press, right? Steve Gutenberg, really great guy in the police academy, invented the
Yeah, I
press.
was gonna say, isn't that the guy who's in the police academy?
I love that.
3 Men and a Baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're
Creepy
exactly
scene.
right.
Creepy scene in 3 Men and the Baby.
Oh yeah, the ghost in the corner.
I was actually telling my daughter about that the other day. I'm like, you got to watch that. It will freak the fuck out of you.
But where was back then? They didn't have the printing press, as I just mentioned. They didn't have the. Of course, today they don't have the electronic devices. So once it was dead, it was to dust.
Right.
And he, of course, did mention that we are reinventing what's already been invented. It's sort of like electricity. It's been around. We think Ben Franklin had something to do with it.
That's a natural phenomenon.
It is. There is mention of the ark, which was probably a giant battery, right? And so we lose knowledge. Glass blowing was lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's this knowledge lost. But when it's recorded and passed down and kept safe, I think he would be surprised at what he could pass down and not repeat. Or if he needed to be, if it needed being repeated, it would be learning. Look at the mathematics that we've learned today. Moore's law comes into mind is that we're taking this big leap every few months. And it used to be every couple of years. Now it was every couple of months of technology. And see how much we've learned so much. It used to be that when we looked up at the sky, we wouldn't dream of going to the moon. It was heresy. But now this guy never looks at beyond the scope of things that are happening. He just looks at the now, right? And he doesn't instill that passage of, what do you want to learn? Once again, drawing back on martial arts, different styles come and go, but there's always that one core style that's been around since the 1800s and even beyond that.
Yeah, it's boxing.
Boxing,
And
even
wrestling.
better.
Boxing
and
and
wrestling, right?
That's it.
Right. And you go to any of the adult men's clubs, they have those nights where they're always wrestling in leotards. I thought that was cool.
What? What?
But once again, you look back and then, see, you sidetracked me. I knew where I was going. Damn it, I had
That's
this.
how it works on Beaveman and the Doc. You say something that I want to make fun of or do something, I'm going to interject about it.
But yeah, there was no pass. Where was it written down that it's like, this is the knowledge that I'm going to pass on, and so no one forgets it?
Here's my takeaway from some of these things that he's saying, though, is when he says that anything that's been invented, he really says anything that's been invented has already been invented. That, to me, was a really provocative statement because I'm like, what if this guy's saying that the civilization that we have now was already a civilization once? What if we lost technology? What if all this stuff was already here and
That's
we
true.
lost it?
That's true. Look at, what is it? It's a naval thing.
Butt plugging?
Butt plugging, yeah.
Spending time in the barrel? Long, hard, and full of semen.
It was one. It's called a sextant. I forget it.
A sexton?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called, where he judges the
Oh, and they
stars.
can still navigate by night. Yeah, and they still are, as my understanding, they're still trained in that, using that for navigation.
But look at the knowledge that was lost and reinvented. It was like that. And they lose that. How many times have we looked up the stars and like, okay, how do we get out of here?
Right.
And it's been lost. Oh, sorry about that. I would actually take that phone call from the telemarketer, the chat pack I would grab randomly. And I've actually got 2 of these.
So you would just try out your different topics
I
with the
would.
telemarketer.
And one of these is a third one. We thought of Tim because he's so eclectic. Is 50 questions that were probably inappropriate topics. Like if you were on a plane crash and some ungodly, weird place, and you could only eat the elderly or the babies, who would you eat first?
I would probably eat the babies first.
Right.
Babies have more fat, and that's going to sustain me longer. The elderly, I would just smother them so that they don't get any food. Is that a moral quandary? Is that a moral quandary?
I don't think so, because
I don't think so
I think they actually proved that up when the plane crashes up in one of the mountains or Donner's Pass.
Right. Sad thing with Donner's Pass. But
Yeah.
actually a fascinating story.
But I would go, this question, and one guy says, "Sir, you know what this phone call is about?" And I said, "Yes, I do. But you called me, and I want
Exactly.
to talk."
I want to talk. Hey, man.
And I get clicked.
And before I get too sidetracked on this, we were talking about Mormons and or the Church of Latter-day Saints. Hopefully one of the guys that I know that I worked with in Arizona is listening to this podcast. And if so, hey, you really got to do a podcast with me where we ask you these questions about your religion, if you don't mind, because I think it would be freaking awesome.
I think just about any church these days is gone beyond the recognition of what it could be to cult-like status now.
Well, they're all cults. They've been cults from the beginning of time, right?
I guess if you want to look at it.
I mean, look at the Catholic religion, right? They had concubines. They had all kinds of crazy stuff. But now they're not even allowed to, you can't even let them get married. You can read the religious texts where they had concubines. Cardinals, the higher ups in the church, didn't used to have to be priests to be a cardinal. So, like, for example, when a pope died, popes didn't live very long back in the day. They would actually have a council of cardinals that would choose the pope.
They still do.
Well, I mean, but what they would do is this. Because the Roman Empire, or the Roman Church, was so rich, what they would do is they would pick a pope who could lead, who they kind of agreed with their ideal or their mindset of the church, but they wanted someone who was probably going to die in 2 years or less.
So a power struggle.
Yeah, so what they didn't want a pope who was going to live for 10 to 15 years. Because everybody's goal or their hope was, if I get to be pope, I can split up the treasury amongst my family and make my family rich. And
I see that, yeah.
And with power, you could appoint cardinals. Cardinals didn't have to be priests first. You could have no religious training whatsoever other than what you received as, because they taught them in school or Latin and all that crap, and be appointed a cardinal. You didn't have to be a priest first or anything. They would just appoint their family as cardinals.
Interesting.
And split the power of the church. And I read this really good story called The Mistress of the Vatican where it talks about this, but it said in there also that if the Pope lived too long, they would drain the treasury. So by the time the next Pope took over, they're like, there's nothing in the treasury, and they had to figure out how to fill that treasury back up.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they've always been shady, in my opinion, and this is one of the biggest arguments I get with my mom. And I don't argue about religion anymore. I used to argue with my parents and my brother about it when I was like in my 20s. I don't do it anymore because they refuse to acknowledge history.
What I love I made my mom upset like this, and I could drop my voice an octave lower, and I go, if you read Revelations, it's already come true. And she would look at me and go, what? And I said, and this city will burn, the angels will burn. I said, if you look out west, Los Angeles is on fire.
City of Angels.
Right. And then I said, in Revelation says, and the dead will rise. You look out at Louisiana, the graves are rising from the water table, and they will walk the earth. Well, they're floating. I mean,
it was sort
take it out. And she would look at me, stop it. Are you sure? It's not happening. Revelations. This is the end times. And it's like, you can really creep somebody out. It doesn't say that you'll have the mark of the beast. According to Ecclesiastes, it's already come and gone. Right. You're already marked. And they're like, what?
Yeah, and the number of the beast, there's some speculation that it's actually not 666.
No, it's actually 667. It's his neighbor.
Yeah.
Right. He moved into a really good condo there. And, that's the other thing. When you look at the Bible, I like that. Everybody thinks Jesus is the Son of God, depending on how you look at it. Actually, he's the stepson. Right? Because the first one was Lucifer, but Lucifer got a little crazy, got kicked out, like all good kids do. Right? And then he moved into his dad's basement. Right? And it's like he's down there pissed off. It's like playing video games or whatever. It's like, can I come out of the basement now? No, you can.
Why would he want to come out of the basement, though? He's got it good. Mm-hmm. It's warmer. There's lots of chicks there. Well, no, that whole thing, though, if you really get into it, with the Catholic religion and all the religion, well, I don't know all of them, but the angels aren't us, so they're, and there's always that thing that we're like, well, they don't have a sex and all that other stuff, and they're different from us, so are they the children of God? No, he built them for a specific reason. But when they say, I fully believe that at a point in time, and I think the Da Vinci Code talks about this, if I remember correctly, that at a point in time, the church decided whether or not Jesus was going to be the Son of God or whether he was just going to be a prophet. And they took a vote and they're like, let's make him the Son of God. We can make more money that way. Wow. So I think that when Jesus said that he was the Son of God, I think he meant that we're all the Son of God, not that he was specifically the Son of God alone. So these are like these fun conversations that I can have with people, and sometimes they get really pissed. And when they start, that's why I don't like to talk about it too much, but you have this conversation with someone, like, for example, a good example is the daughter, right? She's really funny because she, out of nowhere, I can't remember what the conversation was like, but she said she didn't believe in God. So if you would have said that to my parents, there would have been a major major issue. But she said it to me, and I said, you know what? That's part of your journey, man. You got to figure that out for yourself. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to cut yourself off to the possibility. You know, you seek, you know, find things.
I tell that to my son. It's like, don't put a lot of stock into what you read, right? Unless you think it's the truth, right? But always do your research, right? He's now at that voting age and he wants to vote. I'm like, I don't care who you vote for. Vote your conscience or vote the politics, whatever. It's like, Dad, I don't believe in God. All right, you don't believe in God.
There's no vote on that.
There's no vote.
Not yet.
I don't know. According to the Catholic religion, I mean, we haven't gotten the next pope yet, have we?
I don't know.
Yeah. You know, why don't they ever elect a pope with a really cool hat, too?
I don't know, because originally I can remember making this comment to my mom once, and this was when I was very young, and she said something about the Pope. I'm like, well, isn't the Pope Jewish? And she's like, no, the Pope's not Jewish. I'm like, well, then why does he wear that funny little hat? And it's the same thing. The same thing. She's like, no, you idiot. You're a Catholic. You were raised Catholic. You don't know that? I'm like, well, sorry.
I got a friend who's a devout Catholic, and I said, here's a man telling us to have more kids. We're very, very much an overpopulated world. Why is he giving me marital advice and sexual advice when he is not married and he's celibate? Well, he wears a wedding ring. Why?
Well, they don't all. It depends. Mm-hmm. Some of them do, some of them don't.
But I started to make her more upset with my questioning this, right? And I said, why does he wear a wedding ring? Well, it shows that he's married, so he can have kids. Well, we're all his kids. Well, he owes me a backlog of fucking Christmas presents.
Yeah, somebody needs to pay for my college. No, if you really, it's what I call poking the bear. You can really poke the bear with some people. You know, like the daughter when she said, I don't believe in God. So we're talking about that stuff, and I'm like, well, just don't ever tell your uncle that. Don't tell your grandparents that. Don't tell your uncle that. They don't need to know. When the topic of religion comes up, you just need to pop smoke and or not get into it. Like I do. I don't get into it either, because if I get into it, I'm going to say stuff like, well, you know, like I said, well, you know, they used to have concubines. They used to have like multiple. I'm like, they stole from the church. This was all their grand plan to become rich in the first place.
Oh yeah, when you mentioned
Jesus
that,
Jesus didn't teach in a church.
When you mentioned that, yeah, I could see that too. And we just went to a religious service for somebody. I can't remember where or who. But I said to my son, just be respectful. I mean, you know, even though we may not believe in what they believe or we have different values, right?
Yeah.
That's the way it's going to be. I mean,
you're
just
like,
respect
and he just pops through the door. He's like, hey, anybody got any Jesus snacks and wine?
Yeah. Right. That's the one thing. Always be mindful of other people's culture, because I don't know how many people got pissed off by going, hey, you know, they go, you should cut your hair. Well, Jesus had long hair and a beard, and he wore a robe, right?
And he was white. Not.
Yeah. Have you seen the show Black Jesus?
No.
Yeah, check it out.
What show? Where's that at?
It's on Adult Swim.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Cartoon Network. It is funny. You don't know if this guy's real or not, but he's going around and he proclaims he's helping people out. But when you watch it, he's got the ghetto people around him and everything, and it's hilarious.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. That's funny. But again, when you go back to the Bible, right? So
yeah,
a lot of people want to profess the Bible, and like I said, because I don't have a Catholic Bible, I don't even know if Ecclesiastes is in the Catholic Bible.
I wouldn't know that either. Because I could find out.
Because you know, when you look at the Bible, there's books of the Bible that I didn't even know that they were books of the Bible.
Yeah,
because they take out
books.
They have omitted books, and I'm like, wow, these are some really good chapters that they omitted. And you're like, why did they omit them? Well, of course, it's like anything else. Well, we don't want you to know. We don't want you to know this.
Of course. Well,
that's a book of the Bible. We don't want you to know that.
It was going back to what you said earlier. I'm only going to show you what I need to show you. That's
right.
it.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a couple passages in here that I thought were really kind of interesting, that if I had said this, and the reason why I bring this up is because, like, my brother's a minister, okay?
Oh.
So people who believe in the Bible only believe certain parts of the Bible to advance their own ideals or the ideals of their religion. And that's all they share with you, because common sense tells you who's going to read the Bible. Like, you can't. I started to read the Bible many years ago, and so I only read certain chapters, because what I did was I'm like, I'm going to read it from beginning to end. Once you get to Numbers, you're pretty much done.
I tried
you read
that.
Numbers and Deuteronomy, or Numbers and Deuteronomy, you're like, oh, fuck this chapter. I'm never going to make it through this chapter.
I actually had a Bible. I had a friend of mine who was a minister. music church director, but he was really into it. And he gave a Bible to me because I said, I want one. So in between doing mold, I used to set molds, I would read it. And I'm like, oh, it looked interesting. So I'd sit there and read it. And then after a while, as long as you just read the text and not chapter 9, verse 3, right? It's okay. Now, I admire those people who can memorize that, right? But I also loathe those people who memorize it when you can't help out everybody else.
Right.
Or you can't do this.
Well, it's like anything else. You pick what you want from it, right? And how does it suit your needs?
Yeah, I've been listening to a religious cast on the radio when I drop off my
That sounds
son.
horrible.
It does. It really is. No,
It sounds terrible.
It is. Just because ever since you approached me on this, I'm like, let's get some context, not only beyond with Ecclesiastes, but let's go beyond that. So it's Pastor J.D. Greer has got this show on the radio, and I only listen to it. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, all right, there's a lot of good stuff here, but a lot of this is, no, it doesn't apply. And then I turn it over to the Rush Limbaugh show. And I'm listening to that, and I'm like, he says, in no weird time this has happened. I'm like, have you seen what's going on out there?
Right.
So I get this contrast of what's going on and how people are perceiving it and what they're leaving out and how they're preaching it to what they want to show you.
Right.
Versus what you would like to learn.
Well, it's like anything else. It's the same thing with politics, law, et cetera,
Oh, yeah.
where you're supposed to be the authority on something, but you're not but you're only telling the piece of it that applies to what's going on at that time. It's like anything else. It's with medicine also. If I tell you what's going on with you, this is what's going on with you. I don't really need to tell you that 50 other things could possibly be going on with you, but this is what I need to tell you, and this is what's important. Doesn't mean that I'm telling you, don't go out and try to figure anything else out and come back and ask me questions. It means that this is what's most pertinent. What I can't stand is when people only use small bits of information because they know you're not going to look at the rest of it. And that's part of ministering, right? And that's part of preaching. Is like, I'm going to teach you this part. I'm going to teach you this part, but I'm not going to teach you this part. Like there's a part in it. I said this to, I can't remember who I said this to once. I said, well, what makes you think that we are the chosen species? Why are we different from, I think the argument was saying that your dog's not going to go to heaven. I'm like, well, how do you know my dog's not going to go to heaven? Well, if my dog's not going to heaven, well, why the fuck do I want to be there? And there's also this thing that that they preach that, for example, if you're married and you're, the love of your life, whatever, right? They die before you, okay? Well, when you die, you won't be able to recognize them in heaven. They'll be no different than any other, because you're not married in heaven. It's just another soul up there. So you don't actually recognize your family that left before you or your person that you're married to.
Boy, that's going to piss off all those ghost hunters I've been watching on TV.
I'm telling you. So when I said this to somebody, they got really upset, and I'm pretty sure I know who I said it to. But but when I go back,
It's
I'm
always
like, but you're
nice
not
that-
preaching. If you believe in the Bible, how come you're not? You can't possibly believe every single part of the Bible. But there's a part in here that says, it's on the injustices of life. Then I realize that God allows people to continue in their sinful ways so he can test them. That way they can see for themselves that they are no better than animals. For humans and animals both breathe the same air and both die, so people have no real advantage over the animals. So to me that means, like, and he says it again, he's like, both go to the same place, the dust from which they came and to which they must return. So what part of that do we actually hear about when they preach to us? Ashes to ashes and dust to dust.
I was just thinking
That's
that.
all they say. They don't say the rest of it, that we are no different from the animals that populate the
But
earth.
then again, it's interpretation, right? It's all interpretation.
Right, exactly. But what advantage do they have to telling us these certain things? Is it to line their pockets? Is it to grow a greater congregation? Is it to spread the religion?
I would say yes to all.
Yes.
With the exception of those who are wise enough not to accept it. No, I'm not saying that they're blind to the fact, but if you've already heard it and you've taken the context of what you can, move on.
Right.
That's what they should do. And most of the people that, when you read about this, it's like, this guy hasn't moved on. He just tells people over and over, and he repeats a lot of the same stuff.
Well,
over
because
and over.
I think that a lot of it is because he's figured out life. I think that when at the beginning he's searching, and he says he searched through all these things, right?
Oh yeah, the entire passage is about him searching.
It's about searching, but in the very end, what he says is true. What I take away from it: we're all going to die.
Once again, he's that goth emo guy out there going, yeah.
Well, we're all going to die, but I think that what he says to me is it's about a moral compass. He doesn't say, well, we're all going to die, so let's just do whatever the fuck we want because it doesn't matter.
Actually, he does that.
He tries it, but he says that it's meaningless.
Yeah, but once again, I've noticed that the Bible is this big moral book, right? It's like draconian law. When you look at draconian law, it was very hardcore, very in your face. If you broke the law, you died, right? With a few exceptions. What was one of them where if a person's house is on fire, the guy runs into it and steals stuff, his house will be set on fire along with him in it. Right?
Not bad.
Right. However, if you run into the house to save somebody and you do some other stuff to it, and while in the process of saving it, your life is spared, you're vindicated. Right. So there were certain exceptions to the law. Right. Because, you kill a man, you die. You kill a man in self-defense. Okay, maybe you get punished. You get married. Maybe you have a couple of kids. That's your punishment. Right. That's about it. So he looks for a moral compass at some point in this, and he tries to actually ignore it when he goes, I forget the passage, but it was like, I wanted to be happy all the time, which means he was depressed. He was probably the first bipolar person in here suffering. But we don't know that because it's never mentioned that bipolarism existed. However, according to him, if it existed in the past, it exists now.
Well, of course.
So,
yeah, of course.
And then at the end, he says, okay, I've had enough. So, don't make a promise that you can't keep. Be true to yourself. Be true to others. Right? Peace out. Right? That's the way it looked at it. In fact, one of the passages are actually, what is it? It's from a song.
Oh, yeah. To turn.
Yeah, when I read that and listened to it, I'm like, why isn't there an orchestra behind me playing this?
Well, but see, I already knew all that stuff was in there. What I've done is when I read through Ecclesiastes, I'm like, this is where all those different sayings come from. That one I knew. I'm like, but here's where all the other stuff comes from. But you're not straight up told that, it doesn't matter what you do. What they've done is they've picked out stuff and they said, this will be a meaningful teaching. What did you notice that he's kind of down on women?
Yeah, I did notice that.
There's a really funny part in here where he says, one part is that he says, I discovered that a seductive woman is more bitter than death. Her passion is a trap, and her soft hands will bind you. Those who please God will escape from her, but sinners will be caught in her snare.
That sounds like the first S&M scene right there. It really does. It's like, ensnare, trap, bind. The only thing this guy is not missing is a safe word.
Well, there's another part in here too, and I can't find the exact spot, but basically he says this. He says, I've searched, and out of 1,000 men, one of them will be good and upright, but none of the women will be.
Well, let's take that to what has happened to what is now. I mean, when you look at the dojo, right? How many men stick with it? And you don't have... No, I take that back. I'll retract that like the Catholic Church.
Well, it is important to retract things. Especially if you're in the Catholic Church, you should always retract your foreskin before letting the little boy touch it.
Oh, it's the Jewish that have it cut off.
Well, it's funny because somebody was... it's funny how so many people get confused about that because of the whole Jewish thing. I always hear people say, oh, well, they've got foreskins because that's a Jewish thing. I'm like, no, you've got it the opposite. And then I've had a lot of people, a lot of women that are confused about it that'll say, so only Jewish men are circumcised? I'm like, yeah, no, the rest of us are completely not circumcised.
Yeah, no, I've never understood the big thing about it until you get into the hygiene purpose of it.
Oh, for sure.
And then it's like, oh, okay. One thing I like about this is it says, when I was listening to this and reading it, it says a time to kill. I'm like, there's a time to kill?
Oh, for sure.
I could go out, but it doesn't specify.
Well, it's not saying for us. It's not saying what the time is. He's just saying, hey, there is a time for that.
Yeah, but it doesn't say what you can kill too.
Well, yeah, it's not saying it's time to kill humans. It's just saying there is a time to kill, a time to heal.
And
I don't think that he was sitting there thinking that he's going to write something to be someday be a Mamas and Papas song.
Yeah, well, I see a time for hating
was
too.
it the Mamas and Papas? If it was the Mamas and Papas and I just nailed that, I'm gonna be pretty impressed with myself. Boy, I bet
I'm thinking of all the seasons are. No, I don't. I'm thinking of 25. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to. Now you're gonna make me go off on my nerd music here. And I'm like, okay, I'll check that out later. I'll get back to you on that.
Well, now you're slightly older than I am, so you should remember that song.
Oh, yes, I am. I remember back when the Bible was first been written. You know, we didn't have paper and pen. What we had was sand and rocks and hieroglyphics. Yeah. You talk about emojis now. Hieroglyphics. Now that's some.
That was the way to go.
That was the way to go. In fact, you know, I knew the Pharaoh, right? I did. He
you're
was such
that
a
old.
nice guy.
You're not that much older than me, and if you're talking about the Pharaoh, then
And, you know, and I want to mention something. He is not mentioned once in this chapter, right? That is just poor recognition on publicity right there.
that's a travesty.
Well, there's a $5 word I don't use.
I'm good at the $5 words.
You know, that's the other thing when you read a book, and I think it's being lost, and I know it's being lost on me, is I will listen to podcasts and I will listen to YouTube. And I think the written word is sometimes, you know, it's gone the way to a point where you have to actually pull yourself back into it and read it. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where that he comes from on that, is that he doesn't realize that technology was going to advance where he didn't see the future as much as I would like it to see.
Right.
If you said in 20 years, this is what's going to happen, right? I had a dream. Now, back then it was a vision, a dream, but you never saw the advancement of that. They thought you were a crazy guy. Let's go back 20 years with us. We never thought we would be doing our own radio DJ stuff. Podcasts are nothing more than radio DJs. And you're like, wow, I could do this.
Right, except you can say fuck.
Yes, you can. And then when you look at the technology, the first computer was ENIAC, or beyond that, it was actually goes back to the 1400s. And you're like, this will never take off. And sure enough, Bill Gates said, watch.
Right. Well, that's only because he tortured a lot of aliens.
I agree. And now we're building a wall to keep them out.
Not those aliens.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What about the transdimensional or the interstellar travelers that we've been torturing to get devices for, or that we've been making deals with? If you wanna butt probe a bunch of our people and rip the tongues out of our cows and turn them inside out.
I miss the Weekly World newsletter or magazine. Weekly World, you remember that?
Yeah.
It was. I miss that because you got Bat Boy sided with President whoever.
I had this discussion with Doc. I said, back when I was a kid, and those good stories have been gone for a good 20 years. Mm-hmm. Because now when you go, it's all about celebrities and it's all about the royals and stuff like that. I'm like, where are the good stories where, Crocodile Boy and
Well, did you ever listen to Art Bell?
No.
Oh, you should know who this guy is if you're going to do conspiracy theories. My uncle, before he passed away, was into him. I found an autographed book of him. But this guy was on AM radio. I think his show was called Coast to Coast. But you want to talk about paranormal.
Oh, I've heard of
spooky
the show
stuff.
Coast to Coast.
Yeah, this guy was the paranormal conspiracy theorist all the way through. And it was awesome.
Well, I have a theory on conspiracy theories.
As all of us do. What is your conspiracy theorist on theories?
So my theory on conspiracy theories is basically a couple parts. So the number one part of conspiracy theories is that the United States is more obsessed with conspiracy theories than any other country on the planet. That's my number one. The reason why is because we have too much time on our hands, too much technology, and we're self-entitled little bitches. The second part of the conspiracy theory is this, that many of the conspiracy theories that we are that we have been subjected to were actually created by other organizations in order to distract us from the stuff that's actually going on. So in other words, the right hand releases this for us to look at while the left hand is doing this over here.
Ah, an illusionist. I would say that's partially true because every time there's something going on, we don't get to see the entire picture. In fact, you look at everything around us, and whenever there's it's like the Masons, right? We think they're a cult organization, and I know a couple of Masons, right? And it's like they shroud themselves in secrecy up until they're exposed, but how, with that secrecy, are they really controlling the elections? Because we've had a couple of Mason presidents, right? And with stuff like that, it's always making me wonder what's really going on. Because no one, what's another one is sort of
like the Skull and Bones Club.
Yeah, that part. It's like, what's your affiliation with that? Well, it's nothing more than a rape fantasy club. I'm like, okay, why don't you come and say that?
That's unfortunate if that's what it really is.
Well, they'll never come out and tell you that.
Right.
It's sort of like, once again, the martial arts. I can't show you that. You're not trained enough. It's like, but I really want to learn that. Become better, and I will show you.
But to me, it's a purely selfish motivation. Like, why do I want to waste my time showing you this and going over every nuance of it when I'm pretty sure you're not going to stick with it? And I think that's how a lot of martial arts are, honestly, because when you learn, and let's face it, when you look at the large martial arts, the well-known martial arts, they're structured to teach to a lot of people at the same time, much like the military. It's a military action, a military movement. Like, okay, they don't teach you the actual core body movement until later. For example, a good example is this. Tang Soo Do, for example. When you do a movement in, say, a form in Tang Soo Do, you start from the ready position, you snap your head in the direction that you're going to move, then your arms and body move in the direction that you're going to move, and before you punch, as you're punching, you're looking where you're punching, and the arm comes out and then you step. Now, that is not how you would fight. It should be a simultaneous movement.
Actually, we're just starting to show that in Kobuyu. We do that now. It's all hand, foot, body motion.
And that's the way it should be. But when you see the larger movements as things start, that's how it starts. But when you see actual practitioners that are greater than, say, first degree black belt and beyond, they don't move like that. So you're like, well, why don't you teach these folks how to move like that? A good example of it also where you start off learning that appropriately is another nerd martial art that I do is Abrazari. So Abrazari, a European or a Western martial art, if you will, that focuses on wrestling, dagger, spear, sword. Well, if you move before the sword comes down, if you were in an actual sword fight, which I'm sure I'll never be in one, you would get stabbed by the other person's sword because you moved and then you swung the sword. But you should swing the sword before you move, because otherwise you're screwed. And that's something that's taught from the very beginning. But most martial arts aren't like that. Most martial arts, you move and then the punch comes. And that's a standard way of practice. But like I said, when you look at the higher belts, they don't do that. That's not how they move.
Yeah, well, I can understand why they do it in the beginning like that.
Well,
because it's a broken down thing. But
Yeah,
at some point, once they get it broken down, and actually we're starting to show this, it's like, okay, this is the broken down version, but we're also going to show you why you're doing this, right? And that's what we do.
Yeah.
I agree that a lot, there's that mysticism about it because once again, you're a black belt, I'm one too, and when they go, whoa, you get to know the stuff. No, I get to know
I know less.
I know less, or I get to know what you know. And when I work with you, I'm going to actually try to improve myself. I'm not going to keep anything a secret. Unless you're annoying me, then I won't tell you shit.
Well, the downside to working with new people also is you get some benefit, but not as much benefit as you would get to working with a black belt. That's the downside for us specifically, because if I'm working with a person who's never done a joint lock, when they put a joint lock on me, I don't feel anything. I actually have to put myself in the position for them so that they know what it is. And that always, you have to explain to new people, don't be frustrated because I'm not tapping out because you're not getting the joint lock. And they get frustrated and they try to wrench on it and do all this other stuff to get it to work. And you're like, no, that's not the point. It's not I'm like, you
Why
shouldn't be
didn't you
frustrated
go
at something
down?
I'm good at that you don't understand yet.
What? Yeah, it's like, why aren't you screaming in a pain? No, I got you.
Yeah, because it no hurt. You know, do a good job. It not hurt me.
Or you're like, oh, I see it coming. I know what you're going to do because I told you. No, you watch my other hand, slap you with this
Yeah,
one.
right. Yeah.
Right?
So, but again, when you do that, you're like, okay, well, I've got to do this, and then they want to ask all these questions, and you're like, just fucking do the thing because you're not gonna last, and I'm gonna teach you some shit, and and don't go try to do this on somebody because you're gonna fuck it up, and then they're gonna be like, where'd you learn that? And then you're gonna tell them where, and then they're like, oh, well, they don't know anything.
You remind me of the character in Karate Kid. Just sweep the leg. What?
Just
Sweep the leg. And I think that's what this guy's problem
Send him
is.
home in a body bag. That guy's dead now. By the way,
Yeah, he
just
actually
passed away.
passed away.
He just passed away.
Actually, in the series, in the YouTube series, he was one of the first ones to die. He actually dies
Does he?
on a run. Yeah.
Oh, I've only seen season 1.
Okay,
I'm
I'm
see
sorry.
Season 2. I got to see season 2. And
I feel like I'm curdled milk now. I spoiled it. I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. I'm gonna
it's-
see it. I'm gonna see it.
But it's like this guy, right? And when we'll go back to Ecclesiastes, this guy doesn't really get to experience it as much as he should. He goes around and it's like he did a year of this, or he didn't.
But he
even do-
experienced life more than we will.
I don't think so.
I do because the guy was
well,
a king in Jerusalem.
okay,
of course he
okay.
did. He's like I bought all these slaves and I had so many slaves that they
Yeah.
made more slaves.
And when I saw that passage, I'm like, you didn't experience being poor, right? You didn't get to experience it. What poor is?
He met people who were poor.
No, yeah. Well, he met people, but it's like sort of like once again driving around. You live in a big house. Your house is great, right? You can tell your kids are not home because your house is clean. I have a teenager living at home. My house is a wreck, right? And I'm like, I got to experience Joan's life for a second. That makes me an expert. No, it does not make me a damn expert.
No, here's the difference. There's the reason why. Here's the reason why. The reason why is this. I was in the Army as an infantryman, very regimented and very strict conditions. I had to do everything myself to a certain standard, right? So that translates to the rest of my life. You were in the Air Force and you had housekeeping. So you didn't have to learn all that. So
We
you
did
so you
not
didn't-
have
So
housekeeping.
you didn't make your child learn how to do those things.
No, we didn't have housekeeping. I do admit our tech school.
They left mints on your pillows.
I really wish that were the case. Once we got out of boot camp, we went to tech school, and the first words that were said to me was like,
No one's going to make your bed for you anymore.
"Yeah, relax. You don't have to do that." We did. They still did room inspections, right? They expect your room to be neat, but not completely boot camp clean, right? And that was about it. And then when you got to your first base, you got your room with whoever, and they expect you to, here's your, be on time. Don't be late. Go get yourself a haircut if you need one. Shave, right?
Go get yourself a haircut if you need one.
Yeah. When I stood next to the Army or the Marines, right, these guys were like, they could find something that was out of place in a heartbeat. I won't say the Air Force was any more relaxed on uniforms or anything like that. However, we didn't have to look as sharp as you guys have the time, right? And the haircuts, of course, every 2 weeks you had to get it. You have to trim your mustache if you had one, right? But you look at the Marines and the Army, these guys were constantly in the field, right? And I admire you guys for doing that. Don't get me wrong. I admire you guys completely. And they would scream and yell. But when they got to the Air Force Base, they're like, man, you guys have a maid. It's like, what? You guys got mints on your pillow. I'm like, where the hell did you hear that? I go, John.
You guys
I'm like,
have
"No."
cable. You guys have cable.
Yeah, we had cable. We had good chow halls, right? I never knew what the Army life was like. Not that if I didn't have to go experience it, I wasn't, that was what, if you sent me there, okay. I went to Italy. They put us, I stayed on base for a little bit, and then they put us in a hotel. I guess that was Army life, right? But there was a power blackout, so you couldn't see. And I don't know where everybody got the idea that we have mints in our pillow.
No, I mean, no, but there's no reality. It's not based on truth at all whatsoever. Now, I did meet people in the Air Force that said, and this is what they told me, they're like, we like when they would go on TDY and stuff like that, or all these places, and they get put up in hotels. We didn't get put up in hotels. We stayed in barracks when we got sent places. And I knew people that were stationed on post that did have housekeepers.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, wow, that's pretty crazy. So they had Germans that came in and cleaned their stuff. I'm like, what?
I went TDY. I got put up in barracks, but that was about it.
Yeah.
I didn't get the housekeeping.
Well, I don't begrudge anybody for any military service they did, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to make fun of it.
Oh, no. As
I said.
I don't make fun of the Air Force. I was just getting ready to go to Taekwondo up there at the Base Rec Center. And we come out, and there's some boys from the National Guard. There had to be a master sergeant, 6 striper, and had his stomach way out. And he goes, "Boy, it is cold today." I said, "Sir, is it cold?" "You bet." I'm paraphrasing here. And I said, "Sir, it's about 30 degrees. This is pretty warm." "Y'all crazy." I'm like, where are you guys from?" "We're from Georgia."
Oh, Georgia.
Yeah. And I was like, really? Once again, nothing against the Air National Guard, but you get the lifers, right? Lazy, ignorant fuckers expecting retirement, right? And a lifer's juice. And you think about, if they're going to send you to different places in the world, you should be at least prepared for that instead of bitching, right? Because if you're active duty, they send you there, and that's your home. You get used to it. No amount of bitching is going to change the situation. Right. I was pretty fortunate enough to go to certain places and be comfortable. I never went to any harsh environment other than Maine, where it got down to -10, -20. With a wind chill, it dropped it down to -70s plus, possibly.
How many days a week did you have lobster in your...
Oh, my God. I got so sick and tired of it. It was just wild. I mean, every time the bombers would fly over, I knew they were just going to get lobster for everybody.
Lobster.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm sure that's how it was.
I mean, going back to the Ecclesiastes, though, it's like, this guy never experienced a lobster, so how does he know what it tastes like?
Well, I don't know how close to the sea he was living.
Well, that's the other thing. You said he was rich. Where the hell was his boat, right?
He seemed to have had a lot.
But he didn't have enough, or he didn't experience life, right? He experienced life at his level, but he didn't experience life. You didn't get out and see the world. Now, back then, the world meant to the edge of the desert, and that was it. Nowhere in the world does he mention going beyond the seas. He says the sea's empty, the river's empty, the sea, it's full, right?
True.
I always looked at the horizon going, where does it take me? That was it. My lust for wandering is great. This guy said, I went to the end of the block, and you know what? That's it right there. I am done like that. And then he goes, well, I got women, right? He never had to pursue a woman. Any man who's ever pursued a woman knows you got rejection coming.
Oh, for sure.
Lots. And when
you have more rejection than not.
And when you're a prince, you're like, hey, baby, oh, you got money. Why don't you come back? And if he got rejected, right?
They just chopped their head off.
No, not even. All right, she doesn't like me. I'll buy her family and screw her then. That was it. He bought families, right? And I had slaves. This guy was a pervert to a point. It's like, I bought men and women.
Wow, you took a way more rough interpretation of him than I did.
Well, back
I
then,
thought he actually had some good shit to say. I mean, because after all of it, his takeaway was, here's the thing, right? He concludes it, but then in my Bible, there's a concluding thoughts section, which I feel like he didn't write. Because his final word is this, basically. He said, this. Eat, drink, and be merry. That's where this comes from, too. Eat, drink, and be merry. Eat, drink, and be merry, and work hard.
Yeah.
And worship God. That's what he said. That's the takeaway, right? Because in the end, all is meaningless. But the concluding thoughts from this chapter is, here's my final conclusion. And it's not saying that he said it. It's, fear God and obey his commands, for this is the duty of every person. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. He didn't say that. That's what their final interpretation is, and that's the final lesson that you're going to get preached about. It's going to be that. It's not going to be eat, drink, be merry, work hard, worship God. It's going to be that final one where somebody's saying, hey, dude, you need to fear God, obey his commands, listen to me because I'm the representation of God on earth.
And even though he was mentioned as the preacher, I mean, once again, I'm going to go back to, why would I listen to a guy who's telling me to be happy with my life when you have it all?
Right.
and I have nothing.
And work hard.
And work hard.
So
right?
he's again, that's where you talk about what is the benefit of preaching this, right? It is the benefit of a king telling his subjects, this is what you should do. And it also says in there, don't make fun of your king.
Oh, yeah, I saw
So
that.
there's some good lessons in here, but it's like the same thing where it says, oh, but the final lesson is this. You should work hard, worship God, not make fun of your king, etc., etc., etc.
He's really middle of the road on a lot of this stuff, too. It's like...
He goes back and forth.
He does. It's sort of like, back to the, if you don't want to date me, I'll buy your family, or I'll have that. If I want slaves, I'll have slaves. And I had many children or women or lots of sex, and I drank a lot, right? There was no, you know what, just, where's my happy medium, right? He didn't find it. He looked for it, but he could never find it within himself to have that happy medium, right? He only explored what he wanted to explore. He didn't have that lust and that's probably one of the 7 deadly sins. He didn't have that drive to see what was beyond the scope of things. And that's what really I took away from this. Yeah,
I think this was written from, what would be interesting is if there was an interpretation of this, a factual interpretation, which of course you can't make because this is written thousands of years ago or whatever. But it would be interesting to know.
I think this was published in...
well, that's not when it was written.
I'm sorry.
The actual words. But it's, what is the actual lifespan of the teacher from the time he wrote it till the time he concluded it? Because to me, it reads as someone who started writing it when he first started seeking, like as a teenager, until his end of his life, where he realized, yeah, guys, this was everything I did up to a point where then wisdom came at an older age, and I realized that this is what's truly important.
Sort of like any goth emo kid out there, then as he becomes to an adult life, you've come full circle.
Right. That's what I look at this as. I look at this as, oh, this was the natural evolution of a man, or natural evolution of a person, with some good takeaways, finally at the end of his life, and which this goes back to the life lesson. The life lesson is this. It doesn't matter what your kids do or what you tell your kids. They're going to do whatever the fuck they do, and they're going to make the same mistakes that you made.
I would say that's partially true, for the simple reason as I teach, or I should say coach, I often tell people, be better than me. Don't do what I do, but be better than me. Right? If you're going to make this, I often put myself out there. I'll go ask a question to somebody, and I'll turn around
And they're like, Ron, you idiot.
Exactly. No, that's the truth. And they'll look at me, and the person that really wanted to ask the question will look at me.
They're like, thanks for asking that question, so that
exactly.
I didn't have to.
And I'll say, let my life be a lesson to what not to do.
Let my deriding and harassment and being treated like poo-poo be a lesson for all of you. Maybe you'll get something from the abuse that I have suffered.
And I know that's what Jesus Christ said on the cross. Is like, oh, come on, not another nail here, guys. Right. And that goes. I take that away as that's what I do. So someone can learn. Let my life be an example. And I see if through your interpretation, that's what happens at the end. It's like, okay, I've done all this. But once again, the middle of the road, pick a side, go beyond that. And that's what you really should do. Right?
But I see it as a natural evolution because, for example, the things that I believe now are not what I believed 20 years ago. And that's from life experience and age and everything.
Yeah, he does mention that, life experience. But did he grow from that? Would we grow from that? Right? When he says, I had all these riches, how does that apply to the average person? He tries to be the average person, but he can't.
But the other thing you have to look at is the time frame, right? And the time that this was written.
1960 something.
Yeah, right. This wasn't a handbook for the common folk. This would have been a handbook. This would have been teachings that would have only been read and interpreted by the clergy and or the court. And then they're going to pass down whatever they happen to pass down to the lay people or the poor, which is very little. Remember, there was a point in time, not that long ago in history, obviously, when the common folk weren't allowed to read the Bible. They were only allowed to be preached to.
Yeah, that's how they control the masses.
Right. So when you look at this chapter itself, this isn't a handbook for the poor. there's parts of it that are to be preached to the poor, like the work hard, et cetera, et cetera. This is more like saying to the upper rich and the higher, the royalty, that this is what I've found throughout my life. That's how I look at it.
I never saw it like that. I always thought this was not so much, as I mentioned earlier, draconian law, but this was a moral compass. Right? You take away from it, right? Render to God what is God. Be truth to, when he says, don't make a promise you can't make, right? And don't make a promise or a vow to God that you can't keep. Better to keep silent than say something. Or better yet, as I've been told, Ron, and I just did that thing you don't like, better to be quiet than say something stupid. You opened up your mouth. Okay, let's stop the jiu-jitsu class. Let's see what Ron's going to say.
Let's all turn it on.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't know he could cry at that age. He's getting up. That's good.
Well, I could give you my theories on all that, but that wouldn't be appropriate.
Nothing is ever appropriate.
What's your takeaway then from this Ecclesiastes chapter and how it relates to us in life today? You don't have to be too profound. But.
No, I'm not going to be very profound. What I think is the guy lacked a substance that was sorely needed, because when I was growing up, I thought like this. But at some point, there was more to see out there. I just didn't say, that's it. Now, for the common man, if that's the middle of the road for you, this is your chapter, right? At the end, render to God what is God, believe. And that's what this is. As you mentioned earlier, it's like brainwashing for the sheep. What are you going to do? Got a little.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Got excited. That's okay.
Yeah. If you're just going to go out there and go, okay, this is the way it's going to be for me, and this is all I'm going to do, that's great. Heresy in itself is not heresy. When you think beyond the text in here, no matter what chapter, you think for yourself. And we know religion doesn't like that. They don't like you thinking for yourself. When you make fun of this scripture, Bible, you're condemning yourself to hell, right? Even in certain religions, they'll put a death threat on you. But that's thinking beyond this book. And I don't think he saw what he did during his lifetime, but did he think beyond it, right? He's like, yeah, what does it matter? Mm-hmm. It all matters to me, right? At least to me, right? When I was growing up, I always looked to the stars. And to this day, I still look to the stars, because there's something vast greater than me out there. And I want to see it constantly. Mm-hmm. This guy just said, nope, I'm done. Learn. So what I take away from this, without being too profound, is be true to yourself and be true to others. And, leave it at that.
Yeah.
But if you want to wander out there and see what's out there, see what this guy did, use it as a guideline, see where he stopped, and go beyond that. I'm not saying owning slaves, by the way. Don't do that. We've gotten rid of that, right? And, we've all been there, owned a couple, and then, thank God I got rid of mine. Right? That Emancipation Proclamation worked wonders for me, right? I could see Tim now yelling at me.
Anyway, yeah, that's for that one.
All right, but, see what you can see out there. Here's a starting point. Only you define your stopping point. So see that. What's your take on this?
Well, my take is that he wrote this as an evolution of a man, and he humbled himself throughout. So he sought what he could seek, and then he made profound realizations. It doesn't matter who you are, you're going to die, as far as we know. And he said in there, he's like, I'll quote here, he said, "In my search for wisdom, I tried to observe everything that goes on all across the earth. I discovered that there is ceaseless activity day and night. This reminded me that no one can discover everything God has created in our world, no matter how hard they work at it. Not even the wisest people know everything, even if they say they do."
Yeah, but when he says that, it's like, I walked the earth. Where? Did you, once again, I'll go, you went down to the 7-Eleven and like, vast untold riches of alcohol are there.
I don't know. Like I said, I take from what you can. My final thing is, thankfully, this was a shortly written chapter. It's got some good quotes in it. The Mamas and the Papas made a song from it, and it was a good read.
I agree. It was an interesting read. It made me pick it up, and I haven't picked up a Bible without burning my fingertips in a long time.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
I like this. I appreciate you having me, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you listening. Well, I think we did a good job, so I'm going to wrap it up now.
All right.
I'm going to say from the Beaveman, adios, mooch fuckos.